Hey there, everybody. It's Ryan. I am still recovering from my sinus surgery, and our hiatus continues. However, we do have a surprise for you today. This is a bonus episode that we recorded right before my surgery, where we talked to Bill Taylor, who wrote a biography about Mike Connors, who played Mannix on TV. Now, this interview obviously is not focused on MASH, but throughout the interview, we discover that there are many connections between Mike Connors and Mannix and MASH. And one of those connections also is a part of this interview because we also welcome Mr. Jamie Farr back to MASH Matters. So, while I continue to recover and we get a game plan together for the return of MASH Matters, we hope you enjoyed this bonus episode. Thank you for your patience. We will see you soon.
Well, hey, Bill Taylor, thanks for being here. This will be a little bit different, not as MASH-centric as most of our podcasts are.
Right.
Because this is a little bit different because we're going to be talking about a book that you just wrote. And I'm going to tell the title of the book. It is called Mike Connors, A Life of Integrity in Film and Television. And you wrote that. I'm not sure what integrity has to do with film and television, though. That's the confusing part.
I've been in this business for 70 years. This is Jamie Farr, and I've never heard that word integrity.
Well, there's a first for everything, Jamie.
Yeah, that's true.
The funny thing is my editor, I won't go into this long story, but I had this editor because all these people tell me you have to have an editor, Michael Dante and other people. So I go and get this editor, and she does a great job. But at one point, I tell her, this is what I want to call the book, Mike Connors in His and Others' Words. And she's like, there's this dead spot. And she goes, Bill, no, it doesn't say enough. It's not particular. And all these people said such wonderful things about him. You have to change the title. So she came up with the subtitle.
Well, it's okay. We'll all look up the word integrity and we'll figure out what it means. And, the other wonderful special guest we have today, besides this wonderful author who wrote this wonderful book named Bill Taylor, is a wonderful gentleman named Jamie Farr. Hello, Jamie Farr. How are you?
Hello, Jeff Maxwell. Hello, Ryan. And hi, Bill Taylor. And I indeed enjoyed your book very, very much.
Thank you, Jamie.
You wrote about a gentleman who always brought his light into the room. You know, there was a show I did where Maury Schwartz said to Mitch Albom, never hide your light under a basket. Well, when Mike would walk into a room, it would get a lot brighter.
Oh, that's wonderful. Gosh, that's a wonderful thing. As I said, this is not going to be as MASH-centric, but it is kind of because, Bill, you point out in the book and discussions we've had there are 3 MASH actors who were on Mannix, this wonderful show that Mike Connors did that he's quite well known for.
Right.
And that's who's that woman? Oh, yeah. Loretta Swit, Mike Farrell, Larry Linville.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about why Jamie Farr is so connected to Mike as well. But those 3 actors were on episodes of Mannix, which is terrific. That's great.
Yeah, it really is. And people don't, because I've watched MASH Matters and I've talked to you folks about it. And of course, I've watched MASH over the years too. But I guess once I started writing the book, I looked at it a little bit different. Not only because of you look at MASH and you go, this is this person, this is this person. But I look back and go, does anybody remember Larry Linville was Sergeant Kramer, eventually Lieutenant Kramer on Mannix before he came to MASH?
Mm-hmm.
And Loretta Swit, she was in 2 Mannix episodes before she ever went to MASH. And then Mike Farrell, later, I think it was in 1975, he was in an episode called Blind Mirror. So there's all these serious actors from MASH in Mannix. And then Jamie, it was kind of funny. When I met Jamie, I walked up to him and I'm sure he was probably expecting me to go, let's talk about MASH. And when I start talking about the Love Boat, he looks at me like, What? So he and Mike were in the Love Boat together.
Indeed.
Yeah. And Jamie, that episode, gosh, you went halfway around the world, didn't you?
We did. It was one of the most fascinating and exciting experiences that I had ever had. And of course, I can thank Aaron Spelling and their production company, because oftentimes, not as often as a lot of us actors would have liked it to be, but we actually went on the Love Boat to the places that the story revolved around. And this particular one, it took us to Egypt, it took us to Israel, it took us to Turkey, it took us to Greek islands, and it was one of the most exciting things that I'd ever encountered. And we were allowed to take our spouses, and also we not only when we worked together, as I did with Mike, and Mary Lou, I think, was there as well, and his wife, Mary Lou Connors, and we got time to spend together at the dinner table. And also when we weren't shooting, we would do like 2 episodes. They'd have a cast for one episode, and the cast that I was with Mike was another episode. So we'd get a day off, and we got time to go out and sightsee and actually be a tourist in the areas we were in. So I got to know Mike very, very well. And I said, he is just, Jeff and Ryan, you guys have been in the business a long time. And when some of the actors start to make it in terms of visibility and work, their egos take over. And Mike was never that kind of a guy. He was always Mike Connors, and it was so much to be around him and have fun and just joke.
Ah, wonderful. I talked briefly with Loretta this morning, and she said he had built-in humility.
Yes.
No
Yes.
pretense as being the star of the show. And people would say, oh, come on, was he that nice? And she said, yeah, he was. That's pretty remarkable that somebody in show business would be that nice.
Yeah.
Actually, what's funny about that is everybody I talked to, all the actors that are interviewed in the book, all talked about that. And Loretta, I remember when I talked to her the first time, she said, Bill, I met him in the mirror. And then she tells me the story, how she's sitting in makeup chair one day, nervous as all get out, and thinking, what am I going to do? I haven't been in TV much. Or I think she did one other thing. Then all of a sudden, over the makeup chair in the mirror, he appears and says, hey, I'm Mike Connors. And she's saying, oh, hi. And he says, you're going to be a big star. Don't worry about a thing. So it took her nerves away. And Jamie knew Mike back to, I think it's the Red Skelton, 55.
Yeah, exactly. When I was with Red, and I think I'm trying to remember, I think I was just gotten out of the Army. And I think it was around 1959, or it could have been even before when I went in. But I used to do his show all the time. And at that time, Mike was doing Tightrope. The half hour, was that a half hour show? I think it was a
half hour show.
Yeah. Right. And his name was Touch Connors at that particular time. I think before he went to Mike Connors. And I got to meet him. And of course, he's Armenian. Ohanian is his real last name.
Right.
When you got an Armenian and a Lebanese together, what do we talk about? Not show business, food.
Yeah.
Baba ganoush and hummus. Yeah, we were good buddies.
I was going to ask Ryan, because I've already mentioned this to Jeff, is that I know you're all obviously MASH fans, but when you look at the characters on MASH, even with Jeff too, but Loretta and Larry and Mike Farrell, do you think, hey, I think of them only in those terms? Or you go, wait, I know they did all this other stuff, like Mannix and things.
For the most part, in my mind, these actors have been so much a part of my life as a big MASH fan as the characters they are on MASH. And so it's not until I see them in other settings, in other films, that it reminds me of how good they were, especially when they're playing a completely different role,
right,
than Max Klinger or Hawkeye Pierce or Hot Lips, whatever. It's wild. I will admit that I don't know much about Mike.
Right.
Mannix predated me just a bit. It ended the year I was born.
Right.
So I didn't really ever watch Mannix. In fact, I'll make a confession right now. I watched my first full episode of Mannix today.
That's good.
Yeah. And I purposefully found an episode with Larry Linville.
Oh, that's great.
So I could see, because this predates Frank Burns. It was so interesting to see Larry Linville, not in fatigues,
right,
but in a different setting with different people and having a different impact on the scene that he does with when he's Frank Burns. So it is interesting. And so thank you for introducing me to Mannix, because now I know a little bit more about the show, and looking at some of the research online and some of the research you sent, I'm more interested in Mike now than I was before. And I'm hoping that listeners too, who may not know who Mike Connors is, will, after this episode, want to read your book, maybe want to go online or...
Well, also, if I may interrupt, Mike was also a movie actor beside being a television actor.
Right.
And he was he was a good leading man. He was a handsome leading man, and he could do drama and comedy. And when he was doing Mannix, I know he did a lot of his own stunts. Isn't that right, Bill?
He did a lot and got hurt quite a few times too.
Yeah. Because when I got with him and Mary Lou later on, just getting together for dinner or something like that, Mike had a walker on him, and I think all those stunts, they kind of caught up with him after a while, and it was tough for him to even walk around. A lot of those leading men, did their own stunts. Burt Reynolds, for example, did, and I think even James Garner might have done a few of those. And things, and it takes its toll on you when you get older. That's like a football player that doesn't realize, when he gets hit or something, that later on it's going to catch up with him.
Well, I would tell you, I'm very familiar with that, because my wrist is killing me still from all of the ladle work that I did. Good grief.
All that cooking, yes. Yeah.
All that heavy food.
And Jamie, let's go back to the, seeing somebody not necessarily in a MASH role, but gosh, Jamie, in your first movie, that was a tremendous movie, and you were tremendous in the role.
Thank you.
And you weren't Klinger.
I don't think anybody really was ever Klinger. I think I brought a new character to the television.
You certainly did.
I was just going through some pictures, and I realized all the people that I have been fortunate enough to work with, and because we're talking about the variety of what actors can do, and especially the actors on MASH, because a lot of them were stage trained.
Right.
That's where they got their priorities from. And I look back on it and think of, gosh, I used to look at a picture. I worked with Charlton Heston and Gilbert Rowland and Bruce Bennett and Forrest Tucker, Andy Griffith and Rod Steiger and William Holden and Glenn Ford, Sidney Poitier. And then Burt Reynolds, of course, and Telly Savalas and that. And it's amazing when you are in this business, some people get typecast. And we were so fortunate, the people on MASH, not to be typecasted. We played different roles. And that's what was so exciting about it, because usually, they'll say, no, let's get that person, let him do that same thing, or let her do that same thing. Everybody did things differently on the shows that you got on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And on the Love Boat that you were on, Jamie, with Mike, what was your role on the Love Boat?
I was a part of the Interpol. I was Inspector Sardou with the Turkish Interpol, and I had to have a mustache, and had to speak in a different kind of way to talk to him, as Inspector Sardou. He was the jewel thief, wasn't that right, Bill? He was a
jewel thief, and you were tracking him hard.
He was a Spoonmaker diamond he stole. Yeah. Yeah, we actually did scenes at Top Copy in Istanbul and wherever we were. It was so adventurous. It was just absolutely wonderful. And I said that we had two different casts, so we got to spend time with all. We had Eva Marie Saint, Shirley Jones was on it, Linda Evans,
but in a different part.
Harvey Korman, Nancy Dussault. I'm trying to remember all the Eddie Albert. Gosh, we had so many different people. Lorenzo Lamas, and we became a family because we had our own ship that we were on that Aaron Spelling had made sure that so that we wouldn't be involved with the other people, tourists on a voyage that they take for a vacation.
Mhm.
So it was just a wonderful. We went to Ephesus. It was great. It was
And David
incredible.
Hedison was in that one. Maybe not quite your storyline. Your friend
Yeah,
David.
David Hedison. Well, David also is Armenian. His name was Hadishian. So, and again, we got to talking about food, David, Mike, and I. and also, the different countries that we went into. They in history they used to have problems, with one another's nationality. So we said, you know what? If we're in Lebanon or something, we didn't go to Lebanon, but like Turkey, we want to make sure that they didn't know that they were Armenians.
Oh,
If we were in Israel, we made sure that we had Israeli names and jokingly. And of course, when we went to Egypt, Harvey Korman, and then we changed their names just as a joke, just for fun. It was a wonderful, wonderful group of people. And absolutely wonderful actors. They all were. Aaron would always do that. He would always hire people that he knew that could take some of the dialogue that they used to have on Love Boat and make it sound better.
Right. Oh yeah, true. You know what? I kind of had something. I was going to lead to a question, and any of you could probably answer it. But what I found interesting when I was a fan first at 10 years old. Love these shows, Star Trek, Mission Impossible, Mannix. Always wanted to meet him. Ended up in California. Even worked at a movie studio. Met all these people, but I never met him. My point is, and then I got sidetracked in life, and I was a policeman for 26 years. When I finally got out, this is where I'm going with this, is that I'd met all these different people, and some were very, they were not as easy down to earth as Mike was. And then I happened to stumble upon someone who knew Mike, and I was just looking for his autograph. And he was so down to earth, and he would talk to you about anything. And I remember telling my wife, Denise, and my sister, Louise, who were fans, and saying, you have to meet this guy. He's just the greatest guy. And what I learned is that there was sort of an enclave of these celebrities, big celebrities, that live normal lives away from Hollywood, like in Encino. And I don't know, Jeff, I think you live out of Hollywood. Jamie is kind of away from Hollywood. Ryan, you're in Illinois. Did you not discover the same people, the same thing, that there's these normal, ordinary, but famous people that were so down to earth?
Yeah. Because people are on television or in movies does not necessarily, dismiss the fact that they are human beings.
Right.
And because of the glamorous side of show business, I think, most people tend to forget that everybody's a human being.
Right.
And even politicians, people forget that they're human beings. I think some of them are, some of them aren't, but some of them are. But I think that, I think it's just a mistake you make because there's so much glamour around show business and people are doing so many things that look so glamorous. And, there is a lot of economy, presented to people in that business. And so you kind of say, well, I'm normal, but they're not. When in the reality is everybody puts the pants on in the same way and all that kind of stuff. So
you have your butler put them on for you, don't you?
Oh, of course. Yeah. No. And she's a wonderful woman too. But I have met some wonderful, beautiful people like Jamie Farr, Loretta Swit, and all of the people that I worked with on MASH who were, certainly people love them, and they are all wonderful, just kind of down to earth, real human beings, which I think not only made me feel so comfortable because that's what I was, but I think that's why people relate to the show so well, because this was a group of people who were real humans and they were showing human activity, and they could do that because they were just down to earth human beings, which we all, really are.
Don't you think, Jeff, that's the reason why they were so good is because they were real people? And so that means when they played characters, they experienced those kind of things in their life so that they could relate to that in the characters that they were playing.
Yes.
And I think people that have huge egos and just think that they're just magnificent in whatever they do, but that don't really have the feeling. All of us, Jeff, I'm sure you and Ryan and Loretta, this business isn't easy.
Oh, no.
It takes you 20 years to become an overnight sensation. and that's the thing about this stupid business. And then you got to be grateful because it is a tough business. It's not an easy business. It's not an easy business to become somebody famous and to make a name for yourself. And it's not easy to hold on to that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're right about that, Jane.
Yeah, exactly. So I think all of us, we're part of the reality of what it's really like. And I always say, I learned this from people like Paul Newman and that, whenever they ask you for your occupation, I always say working actor, because that is the highest compliment you can pay to any actor.
Yeah, it is.
Working, yeah. Well, and Bill, your point about being surprised at actors who are down to earth, the ones that are flashy, who are living extravagantly for the purpose of being seen,
right?
They tend to be seen more. They get more press. They're louder, or they're doing things, whether good or bad, in the public eye that are being shared nowadays, especially with social media, being shared in the blink of an eye. But you have the people who are living their quote unquote normal lives, homebodies staying at home, who want to just do normal things. They don't get that press. They're not seen. It's not flashy. It's not sexy. So you don't see or hear about those people. And I would think majority of the people who are in the business are those people. It's just the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so you're not going to see or hear as much about those people.
I think that's true. Yeah.
And those flashy people won't speak to me, which is really frustrating. I say hello, they don't. Please step away from the car.
But Bill, that kind of leads me to my question about the book that you wrote. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't extravagant. He was not scandalous. So why write a biography about a guy who lived his life with integrity in film and television? What's so exciting about that, Bill?
Well, I tell you what happened. Besides loving the show, as I did a lot of other people, is that when I met him by accident, I after I retired from the police department, and I had sold commercial alarms for a time, and went to go collect my last installment check for a sale before I moved on to something else. And when I went into the optical shop in Encino, I see his photo up on the wall. And they tell me that the gentleman who's selling the glasses over there knows him well, and he could introduce me to him. So ultimately, he introduces me to him, and I get to know him. And one of the first questions I asked with him was, I said, Mike, where's your biography? I want to buy a copy, and I want you to sign it. And this is what he told me. He said, Bill, I wanted to write it. I was interested in writing it, but they told me, you don't have any scandalous affairs. You don't have any sort of tantrums and upsets, and you were never really kicked off, any series and films. And I'm sorry, and he said, but I've been, married for 60 plus years at the time. I've done all these things. And they said, well, we're really looking for, scandals and affairs and things. So when he told me that, I was disappointed. You could tell that he was disappointed in a way, because he had so many stories to tell. And just like if you talk to Jamie or Jeff, and I'm sure too, you start talking to some of these celebrities and they drop these golden nugget stories on the ground like it's nothing. So I was after him multiple times to write it. He told me, Bill, after I'm gone, somebody should write it. I'm good with that, even if I'm not here to see it. And then when he passed, my wife, Denise, and sister Louise said, you've got to get in touch with his wife to write it. So almost over in this story, but the point is, I go back to the guy at the optical shop who gets me in touch with Mary Lou. She meets me, and then she says he got overshadowed in his passing. I think it was Mary Tyler Moore had passed similarly, and they didn't focus much on him. But she said, come on back to my house. I'll let you see these photos. And to kind of wrap this up, which is kind of interesting, in their house, they had these books full of photos of everything he ever did. And I said, wow, how did you collect this? She said, we didn't collect it. A lady by the name of Helen Gagney, his fan club president, collected it along with the fan club. And they always gave us these things, calendars and books. So his career was put together by the fan club.
Wow.
So he was just a great guy, and he had so many stories to tell. And they weren't scandalous, but they were great.
I have a couple of questions. One is about, first of all, I want to talk about you when you were a kid and how you got to watch Mannix, because I find that very fascinating. Then I want to connect you and Jamie, because really you and Jamie are why we're here and how we got there. And I like the synergy, and I like how that all happened. But you as a kid, you said you used to watch Mannix as a 10-year-old in your parents' car. Which did your parents have televisions in their car? How'd you do that?
No, not exactly, but I'll tell you what happened. When I originally discovered Mannix when I was 10 years old, I think it was 1970, you'd watch it initially on your TV and you'd think, gosh, I want to hear it again. I'd like to see it again, but they only broadcast it every blue moon, once a week or whatever. So I thought of this idea that if I got a cassette recorder, I could record it. But then I said, well, if you do it in this room, the sound isn't good. So I said, I got a little TV. I've got this Volkswagen station wagon. I put it in the car. I ran an extension cord, got a cassette recorder, and I'd record the episodes and listen to them later, just the audio.
I used to do the same thing. I wouldn't run an extension cord out to the car, but I would record audio from shows and listen to them. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Before the DVR and all.
It was before VCRs. And unless you had reruns, that was the only way you could really capture it.
Right.
And one of the things about showbiz and about people's relationships and how things happen somewhat accidentally is the fact that you were at a show where Jamie was. I believe it was an autograph show, probably.
Hollywood show.
And you knew of the relationship that Mike had with Jamie on the Love Boat. And so basically, and maybe Jamie, why don't you tell us how that happened?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
I turned 90 years old. Remember?
That part was easy for me.
But Bill was saying. Well, also, Bill, I want to thank you for your service with the police force.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yes.
But the thing is that to get your book published, to have Jeff's book published, to have my book published, there were the very things you were talking about, because it wasn't a kiss and tell book. It's the National Enquirer kind of mentality. If you don't have any of these kind of garbage things in it, they think they can't sell the book. And the stories that you're talking about that happened to Jeff and happened to Mike and happened to me are wonderful stories. I learned that from reading George Burns's book. I was in hysterics reading his life story.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it was entertaining. And you got to find out something about them that they'll always keep in your heart, as opposed to some of the other things that they always want to make scandalous or whatever it is. I don't find that interesting, but that's what you get with the publishers.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, Jamie. And I remember, knowing about the Hollywood shows, Mary Lou made some connections with me originally on the phone, just a few people, celebrities like David Hedison before he passed and one or two others. But literally the Hollywood show was the way in to meet a lot of celebrities. And to answer your question too, Jeff, is that I basically made prints of the different episodes and things that actors like Jamie was in. I printed the Love Boat in a nice picture from the Love Boat episode. Or with Loretta, I didn't. His fan club president had all these photos and sent them to me. And then I would print them and I would walk up to Jamie and Loretta and I'd say, hey, this is me. I'm working on a book about Mike Connors. And you kind of have to get past the, are you a crackpot stage? Where are you?
I had that problem with Jeff when I was working with him.
Yeah, I know. I tried. Sorry, Jamie. It took me a while.
But you know what was crazy, and I mean this in the best way, is that I remember walking up to Loretta, and within like an instant after I said that, she almost didn't seem to care who I was to prove myself, although I'm legitimate, I'm a good person. But the minute you mentioned Mike's name, all concern was gone. She wanted to talk to you about Mike. The same thing with Jamie. I mean, he sizes you up in, I swear it was 5 seconds. And obviously, you had legitimate questions for your interviews when you met with them. And then the last big important component to this is that you guys may not know. I think Jamie may and Ryan maybe now and Jeff because of the book. But there is a company called Bear Manor Media. It's a publishing company. It's owned by a man by the name of Ben Omar. And he does a ton of celebrity books, biographies, even some autobiographies for people who don't have necessarily the scandals and affairs that a normal publisher's looking for. And if you went to Bear Manor Media, you'd see 1,000 books because people are that interested in it.
Sure.
I know Jamie had a little bit difficulty finding the right publisher, but it's not easy.
No, it's not. It's even more difficult now. So I commend you for being able to get this book out there. And, as we're talking about it, I highly recommend it to anybody because it's a wonderful read. You did a wonderful job kind of introducing everybody. I didn't know that much about Mike Connors. I had never met him, which now I feel terrible that I never did. He seemed like such a nice man. But you did a wonderful job at bringing him to us and connecting that goodness about him and that integrity that he had to readers, because I certainly felt it. So congratulations on being able to do that. And as far as, you talking to Loretta and meeting Jamie and showing him the pictures and so forth. And really, that's how I was introduced to you. Jamie suggested talking to you and told me about the book and said, hey, that would be kind of a fun thing to talk about because all of us, a lot of people from MASH were on Mannix and you've written a book about this wonderful guy. So I'm grateful you did that because otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it. So I'm glad you did that. And thank you to Jamie Farr for bringing that up.
Yes.
Well, I was desperate. I haven't worked in a couple of minutes, so no, you guys are wonderful. I know that we're all passing praise back to one another, but Ryan and Jeff are terrific. And again, thank you, Bill, because I had to have my eyes are very bad. I have macular degeneration, so I had to have my wife read me some of the things in the book. And you really captured Mike. And I'm sorry that Mike wasn't with us so that he could have enjoyed all of the people saying all of the nice things that he certainly deserved.
Thank you. And if I can just add another little piece or two there is just that what I found out, and one of the things I learned in writing a book, I was originally going to write this book with a chapter that said friends. And I believe it was supposed to be friends, family, friends, and others. And I was going to list the people kind of that he knew that I got to meet and say, hey, this is what these people meant to Mike. And then when you started talking to them, it totally reversed itself. It wasn't anything about what they meant to Mike so much. It was about what Mike meant to them. So that's why I turned it around to call it friend. And just one more point. I remember talking to Tom Dreesen. He's a comedian. You guys probably know him. He was telling me all these stories. He worked with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis and Dean Martin. And he said, Bill, I'll tell you one story about Mike. He says, I had a friend and he loved Frank Sinatra. He bought all his music, saw all of his movies, did everything, got autographs from him. And then Tom said, well, hey, come on with me one day. I'm going to introduce you to Frank Sinatra. And the guy said, no, thank you. And so Tom Dreesen's going, what? You love Frank Sinatra. And the guy says, I can't because I fear that if I met him and he didn't live up to the expectation, if he was mad or he's upset that day, it would ruin everything I ever thought about him all those years. And that's when Tom Dreesen told me, he said, Bill, if anybody ever took a chance, however it was to meet Mike Connors, they would have never been disappointed because he was always the same person. So, just to point, these folks had such wonderful things to say.
Tommy Dreesen was a very good friend of mine. I used to have a golf tournament hosted a golf tournament in Toledo, Ohio, LPGA tournament. I had Tommy there and his buddy, Frankie Avalon.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And Tommy had a lot of great stories about Frank Sinatra, and Tommy and Frankie are those kind of guys. Also, they're down to earth people. They don't wear that badge of ego. They once you know them, you like them and you want to spend time with them.
Mm.
And if you mention Mike Connors to, Robert Wagner, RJ Wagner, Stephanie Powers, any of them, they'll stop in their tracks to talk to you about them.
You're right.
And one more point, and this is probably true, it's probably true about all of you. But what I found is that normally if I go in my photo album at home, there's nobody famous in the photo album, right? But if you went to Mike and Mary Lou's photo album, there would be every star that you could think of just in their photo album. People they interacted with daily all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not real almost, kind of.
Well, if you look at my photo album, well, I won't talk about it right now. I want to impress all of you right now.
Again,
Ryan has a collection, right?
of Jeff's photo albums.
Right.
Yes.
Jeff's photo album is filled with Vincent Price and Claude Rains. They played the Invisible Man. So.
Bill, thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thank you.
We will put a link in the show notes to the book so people can purchase their own copy. Again, the book is called Mike Connors, A Life of Integrity in Film and Television.
It's out there on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Walmart and all the usual.
And I hope that everybody will check that out. And also, if you were like me and you had never really watched anything with Mike Connors, seek it out and find some of his shows and movies. And of course, Mannix, you can find that streaming. And it's worth it to take a look because just from what I have seen online and from what I've heard today, people like Mike Connors need to be celebrated. We need more people like Mike Connors in the world today.
The last quote from Loretta Swit, he was one of the nicest human beings I've ever known.
May I second that?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I second that.
This has been a real delight. I was, we wondered, well, gosh, people are listening to MASH, we're going to care. Well, but I think everybody will, because I think it's a message that, like Ryan said, he's somebody that you should know and should learn about and hopefully emulate.
All these MASH actors they were on the show too. Some of them got their start. Serious acting.
And also you had guest stars like Ed Begley Jr. and Mariette Hartley, Robert Ito. They were all on there as well. And I also saw that Tom Skerritt was a guest star. Of course, he played in MASH the film. And the future Mrs. Mike Farrell, Shelley Fabre, was also on the series as well as a guest star. So, I mean, there's a lot of different MASH connections. So if you want to seek that out, go watch these shows and see these people, pre-MASH.
Right.
Also, now I have this great Love Boat episode to seek out because I want to see Jamie with his mustache and his accent.
Well, with my nose, you can't see the mustache.
Well, hey, everybody. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Jamie Farr.
Thank you, my friend. Both of you, all of you, actually, Bill and Ryan and Jeff, and say hello to George for me, will you, Jeff?
I will. He will. Thank you.